We got some updates for you in the Sean Diddy Combs case. The music mogul and apparent leader of an alleged criminal enterprise was rushed to the hospital over the weekend. And this at the same time as a co-defendant in one of his civil rape cases is fighting back and coming directly for one of the lawyers. Hey, so we have an update now when it comes to Sean Diddy Combs. And the first one, unexpected. Apparently, it's being reported that he left the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn last week. This is where he's currently being housed as he waits trial in May on criminal charges. And he left to get an MRI at a nearby hospital. So the New York Post reports that the 55-year-old rapper was moved to Brooklyn Hospital Thursday night for the scan. And according to a source, the MRI was for apparent knee pain. Combs has reportedly dealt with knee problems since running the New York Marathon back in the early 2000s. Combs, by the way, used that race to raise millions of dollars for New York City children. And the source told the New York Post that Combs was moved at night to try to keep the exam as low-key as possible. But clearly it became public, and Combs reportedly didn't stay overnight, went back to the cell once the exam was over. Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo, told TMZ, "I cannot comment on anything related to prisoner movements. Also, I'm not commenting on anything related to possible medical issues." As he shouldn't, that is private information. The only way it really would come up during the course of the criminal case is if you say it somehow relates to his detention or somehow relates to his movements or any certain accommodations should be made. Sentencing if he's ultimately convicted, but right now we won't know more information. In the meantime, let's talk about the fact that Combs' co-defendant in a civil case, a case, by the way, that accuses him and this co-defendant, another A-lister, of rape, this guy is once again slamming the attorney behind the case, insisting that he be sanctioned for allegedly not doing his job. We're talking, of course, about Sean Carter, better known as Jay-Z, once again calling out attorney Tony Buzbee, calling out his character, more specifically into question, claiming that the Texas attorney's filings have, quote, substantial inaccuracies and that there was a failure to properly investigate before filing. Now, we've talked about this before, but basically, a civil lawsuit was filed against Sean Combs on behalf of a Jane Doe who says that she was raped by Combs and another celebrity at a home after the Video Music Awards in 2000. She says she was just 13 years old when this happened. And weeks after the initial filing, Buzbee submitted an amended complaint naming Jay-Z as the celebrity who allegedly participated in this assault. Both rappers have adamantly denied the allegations, Jay-Z on the offensive, arguing that Jane Doe's story is full of holes, that all of this should have been obvious to any competent attorney who was going to take her case. And this isn't the first time that Jay-Z has gone after Tony Buzbee. In fact, earlier this month, the rapper filed a motion seeking dismissal and sanctions, accusing Buzbee of failing to properly vet the accuser's claims. And now, Jay-Z is doubling down, saying, in fact, that Buzbee never even met Jane Doe before filing the lawsuit. That is a stunning allegation. So let's dig into the latest filing, because it reads, quote, "A principled attorney, when confronted with factual inconsistencies that cast grave doubt on horrific allegations and reveal the inadequacy of any pre-filing inquiry, would reconsider the lawsuit. Instead, plaintiff's lead attorney, Anthony Buzbee, tried to gloss over them. Initially, he deflected, saying plaintiff's case was referred to his firm by another who vetted it prior to sending it to him, and that his firm would continue to vet her claims and collect corroborating data. Now, he concedes that he did not even meet with plaintiff before signing his name to the complaint and fails to identify any evidence that corroborates anything his client alleged." So Jay-Z's legal team points out that despite having litigated this case for months in the Southern District of New York, Buzbee has not sought admission to that court, meaning he hasn't filed a motion to appear pro hoc vice and pay the associated fees. So you're not licensed to practice in New York, but you get a temporary permission to practice for purposes of a specific case. So they write, "That concern looms large here. Mr. Carter has identified factual inconsistencies demonstrating that allegations in the FAC First Amended Complaint were false or highly suspect. Those inconsistencies undermine nearly every step in plaintiff's narrative: her arrival and whereabouts at the VMAs, her interaction with celebrities, the purported residence, the timeline, and how she got home." So according to the complaint, Jane Doe says that, again, when she was 13 years old in 2000, when her and a friend drove to Radio City Music Hall in New York City, where the Video Music Awards, the VMAs, were being held, She says she didn't have a ticket. So what does she do? She mills about outside. And that's when she says that one of Sean Combs' limo drivers told her to come back later and he would take her to an after party. She claims that she was given a drink at this after party, which she now believes was drugged. She claims she started feeling woozy, went to find somewhere to lay down, and that is when she says she was raped by Jay-Z and Sean Combs. And by the way, she also claims there was a female celebrity who was there, saw this, but has not been identified in this complaint. Now, Jane Doe claims that she ran from the home, found a gas station, called her father, he picked her up. The problem with all of that is there was bombshell reporting from NBC News, and it kind of put a spotlight on some serious apparent flaws in her recollection. In fact, NBC interviewed Jane Doe as well as her father, who says he has no memory whatsoever of making what would be an hours-long drive to pick up his teenage daughter. And according to Busby, some of his colleagues, they did the background work on the lawsuit. But the defense points out that Busby signed his name to this complaint, so any alleged inconsistencies, that's on him. And we'll talk more about what these inconsistencies or apparent inconsistencies are, but Jane Doe has acknowledged there might be problems in her account, but it doesn't take away from the fact that she says this happened to her. But the filing reads, quote, having purportedly left the requisite vetting to others, Mr. Busby cannot now properly serve as the lone declarant, attesting to matters that are outside his personal knowledge and known only to non-declarants who sit silent. He cannot continue post-complaint to whistle past demonstrated inaccuracies in plaintiff's allegations that are staring him in the face. An attorney who fails to investigate adequately before filing a complaint, particularly one alleging serious criminal conduct that will inevitably cause reputational harm, is subject to Rule 11 sanctions. And sanctions can include things like, having to pay a penalty to the court or cover the other party's legal fees. Rule 11 sanctions are pretty high up there. I've talked about it before. You're talking about submitting something that is not based in fact or law, that you're only filing something to harass another party. Really, really bad conduct. But the lawsuit lays out what Jay-Z and his team claim are some of Busby's alleged bad acts in connection with Jane Doe's lawsuit. As to Mr. Busby's reliance on other lawyers and a retired police detective to interview plaintiff and fact-check her account, none of those individuals has even been named, let alone produced as a declarant. Nor does the opposition specify which aspects of plaintiff's complaint were fact-checked. Most strikingly, there is no claim that anyone asked the plaintiff's father, a key participant and ready interviewee, whether he remembered his chapter in the FAC's remarkable saga, to which the answer would have been no. And the lawsuit also has a chart that highlights 9 facts that Busby mentioned in the amended complaint, which the defense objects to. So the first allegation is that a friend drove Jane Doe from Rochester to New York City, and Jay-Z's team says that this was never fact-checked, and that when Busby, his legal team, was asked to identify who this person was, they said it was a 20-year-old who unfortunately is now dead. Second, that plaintiff watched the VMAs on a Jumbotron. Well, the filing says that this is false, and what they do is they point to previous filings that show there was no Jumbotron for the award show because that permit was denied. Later on in the paperwork, the defense says, plaintiff denies Mr. Carter's evidence that she could not possibly have watched the VMAs on a Jumbotron or spoken with limousine drivers, but plaintiff could not have watched on a Jumbotron in Times Square because per the FAC, she was not in Times Square, Broadway and 42nd Street, but outside Radio City, that's 5th Avenue and 50th Street. That's nearly a mile away. And the denial of MTV's permit prevented it from being telecast in Times Square. So that's directly addressing Busby's response that, well, she might have watched it in Times Square and got confused. And then also addressing another response from Tony Busby that, the limousines might have been elsewhere and not in this cordoned-off area where she couldn't have gotten access. Well, Jay-Z's team says, nor could the limousines have been elsewhere because per the FAC, she approached them while standing outside Radio City watching the VMAs. If nothing else, these inconsistencies should have been run to ground before Mr. Busby sponsored allegations that could not withstand a simple Google search. By the way, Tony Busby has responded that this is not the time to throw out this case. We've made allegations. Obviously, another side is going to dispute them. In any litigation, there's going to be a dispute about what happened. This should progress. This should advance. We should have discovery and allow us to make our case. Moving on. The defense claims, again, Jay-Z claims, that allegations 3 and 4 concerning the limo driver and the large white residence with a U-shaped driveway where, again, Jane Doe says that she was raped, these allegations are false. So Jay-Z's attorneys concede that Combs did own a large white residence, but said it does not have a gated U-shaped driveway and is located in East Hampton, a minimum 2-hour drive and over 100 miles from Manhattan. Jane Doe also says that she had to sign what she thinks was an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. Well, Jay-Z's team says that was not fact-checked and that Jane Doe lacked such a document. Jane Doe also claimed that she spoke with celebrities at the party, but the filing lists that as false or highly suspect because she alleges that she specifically remembers speaking with Benji Madden of the band Good Charlotte, but Madden's people say he was doing a show in another state that night. The 7th allegation is that the plaintiff was purportedly drugged and found a room to lay down in. The filing says that can't be fact-checked. Plaintiff told no one for 24 years and did not undergo toxicology screening. So the defense says they also can't fact-check that Jane Doe ran from the house to a gas station because, again, the plaintiff told no one for decades and now claims not to know the resident's location, let alone the gas station. So could this be a case that is allowed to proceed forward just on her account? Sure, but that might not be the strongest account. But finally, Jane Doe says that her father picked her up, which would have meant a round-trip drive of several hours, which he told NBC News he doesn't remember. The filing says Mr. Busby dismisses plaintiff's father's denial of picking her up that night, claiming the events occurred 24 years ago, so it's not surprising that he may not recall a specific drive to pick up his daughter, but it strains credulity that a father, impelled to jump into his car in the middle of the night to undertake a minimum 10-hour round-trip drive to pick up his 13-year-old daughter at a random gas station, would forget the entire episode, and his denial was unequivocal. He said anything like this would, quote, definitely stick in my mind. Earlier in this case, when Jay-Z's attorneys pointed out that photos that show Combs and his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez at nightclubs in New York when this alleged house party was going on, Busby claimed that it was possible for the men to have, done it all. They went to different nightclubs, and then they went to the house party after the VMAs where Jane Doe says she was raped. In this latest filing, the defense provides multiple exhibits that it says refutes that idea. From the filing, quote, plaintiff dismisses photographs showing Mr. Carter at Lotus on the night in question, theorizing that he could have partied at the residence after the nightclub, but that makes the timeline even more far-fetched, as Mr. Combs and Miss Lopez attended 2 nightclubs, Lotus and Twirl. The FAC requires that plaintiff arrived at the gas station after the alleged assault around 1:30 a.m., 5 hours before dawn, after fleeing the alleged party. And tell you what, the defense even provides a table of sunrise and sunset times from the Astronomical Applications Department of the federal government. It highlights that sunrise on September 8, 2000 was at 5:30 a.m. And the defense also included maps showing the distances from the nightclubs to each other as well as to the Hamptons, that the time frame doesn't make sense. Quote, given that the VMAs ended at 11:11 p.m. in approximately 2 hours, Mr. Combs would have had to driven to 2 different nightclubs, each at least 14 minutes from Radio City with 0 traffic and 6 to 14 minutes from each other, spent time at each club where he was photographed, been driven to the imaginary residence at least 20 minutes from Radio City, waited while his driver returned to Radio City to pick up plaintiff, a round trip of at least 40 minutes, waited more time while plaintiff mingled with celebrities and got intoxicated, and then assaulted plaintiff. Assuming arguendo that the timeline can somehow be wrestled within the laws of physics, it cried out for reality testing. Jay-Z's defense says these factual discrepancies are neither isolated nor surprising. They result from Mr. Busby's rush to launch allegations unhindered by mandatory diligence. This court should impose Rule 11C sanctions and direct the parties to confer on a schedule for a briefing and award. So at the time of this recording on Monday, the judge has not made a ruling on whether to impose any sort of sanctions or censure Busby in any way, but I will tell you, this is some strong evidence put forward by Jay-Z. We'll see what Tony Busby's response will be. Again, he has put forward that it's too early to say this. Let's see where discovery goes, but making a compelling argument that there's some key flaws in this, but we'll see which way this goes. That's all we have for you right now here on